order!
Cop slapped
Stop
black
this
female
violence right
Marine in
now!
court.
Let
She
go of
knocked
it!
him out in one punch.
It's
People
my
moved
evidence! Give
slowly,
it back!
shuffling papers, whispering to one another, and glancing at the clock as they waited for the session to begin. The building itself carried a sense of solemn authority. Its tall pillars, polished wooden benches, and large windows letting in pale sunlight all created an environment where everyone instinctively lowered their voices and straightened their posture. This was a place where rules were expected to be followed, where decorum and respect were considered essential, and where the slightest misstep could draw attention from everyone present. Among the attendees was a young black woman, a Marine, whose presence immediately drew attention. She was not only a disciplined service member, but also someone with a quiet confidence that commanded respect without needing words. Her uniform was immaculate, reflecting years of strict military training, and her posture was perfect, shoulders squared and eyes forward. She moved with the calm, measured steps of someone accustomed to focus, precision, and responsibility. Despite the ordinary court setting, her presence carried an undeniable aura of authority, even among civilians, lawyers, and officers. She was there for a hearing that had started as a minor civil dispute, but the tension in the room made it clear that small problems sometimes escalate into something larger. The courtroom slowly filled. People came to observe, take notes, or be part of the process. Some were relatives, friends, or neighbors of those involved in various cases. Others were strangers curious about the proceedings. The murmurs of conversation blended with the occasional shuffle of papers and the faint echo of footsteps against the marble floor. The Marine noticed the eyes on her, not with arrogance but with awareness. Years of experience in high-pressure situations had taught her to read a room quickly, to understand subtle cues, and to anticipate potential conflicts before they erupted. Something about the atmosphere in the courtroom felt different that day, tighter, heavier, as if the air itself carried the sense of an unspoken challenge. The police officer assigned to maintain order in the courtroom had been on duty for several hours. He was a man of imposing stature, broad-shouldered and used to asserting authority. His movements were deliberate, almost theatrical at times, and his voice carried a sharp edge that suggested impatience. From the moment the Marine entered the room, he seemed uneasy, his eyes narrowing slightly as he observed her. Perhaps it was her calm demeanor, the disciplined way she carried herself, or simply the way people naturally gravitate toward those with presence and command respect. Whatever the reason, there was a subtle tension building between them, a kind of silent standoff that everyone in the courtroom could sense if they paid close attention. As the judge entered and called the session to order, the murmurs in the room gradually died down. Lawyers adjusted their notes and papers, and the spectators settled into their seats. The Marine found her place, sitting quietly and observing. She did not speak unless necessary, and her calmness contrasted sharply with the fidgeting of others around her. This composure, however, did not go unnoticed. The officer seemed increasingly agitated, shifting from foot to foot, muttering under his breath, and glancing repeatedly toward her. His gestures were subtle, almost imperceptible, but they conveyed irritation, impatience, and an unspoken challenge. People who were paying attention could sense the brewing storm, though no one could predict exactly what would happen next. The hearing itself began routinely. The lawyers presented their arguments, speaking in clear, measured tones. Witnesses were called, giving their statements and answering questions under the judge's careful oversight. The Marine listened intently, her mind sharp and focused. She noticed details others might miss. The way a witness hesitated before answering, the subtle body language of the officer, the way tension seemed to grow with every passing moment. Her military training had taught her to remain calm under pressure, to analyze situations quickly, and to react only when necessary. In that moment, every instinct told her to observe, measure, and prepare for whatever might come. As the proceedings continued, it became clear that the officer's behavior was increasingly unprofessional. His eyes continually flicked toward the Marine, and his body language suggested frustration that went beyond his official duties. He muttered comments under his breath, audible enough that she caught snippets, though not loud enough for others to clearly hear. The tension between them became almost palpable. Every person in the courtroom could feel it, an unspoken energy that grew thicker with every minute. It was the kind of tension that could either dissipate harmlessly or explode in an instant, depending on how events unfolded. The Marine remained composed. She did not react to the officer's subtle provocations, maintaining the calm, disciplined exterior she had honed over years of military service. Her hands rested lightly on her lap, and her eyes stayed focused on the proceedings, though her mind worked rapidly to assess potential threats. She had been trained to handle difficult and unpredictable situations, from tense military operations to personal confrontations. This was different yet familiar. It was a test not of physical skill but of patience, restraint, and the ability to maintain control under scrutiny. Every nerve in her body was alert, ready to respond if necessary, yet restrained by the discipline that defined her character. Outside the immediate tension, the courtroom itself remained a place of quiet formality. The judge occasionally glanced at the officer, subtly noting his increasing irritability. Lawyers and spectators continued with their work, some aware of the brewing conflict, others oblivious, absorbed in their own concerns. The Marine's presence, however, cast a silent shadow over the room. People unconsciously gave her space, recognizing, even if only intuitively, that she was not someone to be provoked lightly. She carried herself in a way that demanded respect, not through threats or loud words, but through calm authority and unshakable confidence. Time seemed to stretch, each passing minute feeling heavier than the last. The officer's agitation grew more noticeable, his movements more abrupt, his tone sharper. Every glance he cast toward the Marine carried an undercurrent of challenge. The spectators felt it too, an almost imperceptible tension that made them shift in their seats, lean forward, or glance nervously at each other. They could sense that something significant was about to happen, though no one knew exactly when or how. The Marine, ever vigilant, read every cue, every gesture, and every flicker of expression, preparing herself mentally and physically for the possibility of confrontation. She knew that maintaining composure was crucial, but she also understood that some moments required decisive action. As the hearing progressed, small incidents added to the mounting tension. A witness hesitated under questioning, prompting a muttered complaint from the officer. A lawyer corrected a procedural detail, drawing a sharp look from him. Each event, minor on its own, contributed to a rising current of frustration that flowed directly toward the Marine. She recognized the signs immediately: the narrowing of his eyes, the tightening of his jaw, the slight forward lean that suggested he was ready to act. Her instincts screamed that the situation could escalate at any moment, and she braced herself quietly, every muscle in her body coiled yet relaxed, prepared for the right moment to respond if provoked. Through it all, the Marine remained a figure of calm authority. She did not let the tension show on her face, nor did she react impulsively. Her training had taught her that discipline and patience were often more powerful than immediate action. She observed, measured, and waited, all while the atmosphere in the courtroom grew increasingly charged. Spectators whispered among themselves, sensing the electric energy in the air, though most could not articulate exactly why. It was as if the room itself had recognized a confrontation in slow motion, waiting for the inevitable moment when restraint might no longer be enough. And so, the morning passed with an uneasy rhythm. The courtroom continued its formal proceedings, but beneath the surface, a storm was gathering. Every glance, every gesture, and every word carried weight, building toward an unknown climax. The Marine remained steady, the embodiment of discipline and readiness, her focus unbroken despite the provocations surrounding her. The officer's agitation was no longer subtle. It had become a palpable presence, a force pressing against the order of the courtroom itself. And in the quiet moments between legal arguments, the tension lingered like a silent drumbeat, signaling that the ordinary morning in the courthouse was about to change forever. The courtroom atmosphere, which had already been tense, shifted in a way that made every person present aware that something serious was about to happen. The Marine, calm and composed, had been carefully observing every detail, every gesture, every subtle shift in the police officer's behavior. She knew instinctively that his growing impatience was dangerous. While she had faced high-pressure situations in the military before, nothing quite resembled this. The unpredictability of a civilian courtroom, combined with the presence of someone who had authority but lacked self-control, created a unique and challenging environment. Every instinct she possessed told her to stay alert, to remain measured, and to maintain control of her actions no matter what occurred. The officer's movements became increasingly sharp, his gestures less subtle. He leaned forward in his seat more than necessary, muttering under his breath while glaring at the Marine. He adjusted his uniform, perhaps unconsciously, in a way that suggested he wanted to appear larger, more imposing. His eyes flicked repeatedly toward her, narrowing with each passing second. It was clear to anyone paying attention that his temper was building, that his frustration had escalated beyond ordinary patience. And yet the Marine did not flinch, did not show even the slightest indication of fear. Her calmness only seemed to aggravate him further. To him, it must have appeared as if she were challenging his authority, though in truth, she was simply refusing to be intimidated. The judge, focused on the proceedings, occasionally glanced at the Marine and then at the officer. There was a noticeable tension in the way the judge's eyes lingered a fraction longer than usual. Perhaps he sensed what many in the room could sense, that the officer's behavior was approaching a point where it might break the rules of decorum and cause an incident. Lawyers and other courtroom staff carried on with their duties, but even they could not ignore the subtle undercurrent of conflict running through the room. The sound of pens scratching on paper, chairs shifting, and hushed whispers created a background hum that masked the silent battle of wills taking place between the Marine and the officer. Then, without any real warning, the officer made a move that would change the entire course of events. A comment was made by one of the lawyers, a procedural remark about a form that needed to be submitted, and the officer reacted as if it were a personal affront. He muttered under his breath, louder this time, enough for the Marine to hear clearly. His voice, tinged with irritation, carried a sharpness that cut through the quiet of the courtroom. The Marine's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but in focused awareness. She recognized that the situation was escalating beyond subtle tension. It was moving toward an outright confrontation. The officer, now fully visible in his agitation, made a physical gesture, a sudden shift in his posture, a sharp motion of his hand, that broke the invisible line of professional conduct. In that instant, he crossed a boundary that should never have been tested. Without warning, he reached toward the Marine and slapped her across the face. The sound echoed in the room, sharp and unmistakable. Gasps filled the air. Some people in the courtroom froze, others whispered urgently to one another, and a few leaned forward, shocked that such behavior could occur in a formal setting. The slap was not only unprofessional but completely unprovoked. It was a physical violation, a blatant act of aggression in a place that demanded civility and respect. The Marine's first reaction was shock, but it lasted only a fraction of a second. Years of military training had prepared her body and mind to react instantly to threats, to remain composed under physical or psychological assault, and to channel energy effectively when necessary. She felt a surge of adrenaline, a flash of controlled fury that demanded precision rather than impulsive action. Every fiber of her being tensed, yet she maintained her posture, not out of fear, but because she knew that maintaining control was critical. Reacting recklessly could make matters far worse, but hesitating too long would allow the officer's aggression to continue unchecked. For a moment, the courtroom seemed suspended in time. The judge stared, wide-eyed, momentarily stunned by the audacity of the officer's action. Witnesses paused mid-sentence, lawyers froze mid-gesture, and the spectators leaned forward, captivated by the sudden eruption of chaos in what had been a routine hearing. The Marine, despite the sting of the slap, remained composed. She allowed herself only a brief internal acknowledgement of the pain, a signal to her body that action might soon be required. But her focus was on assessing the situation and preparing for a controlled response. The officer, perhaps expecting submission or shock, failed to anticipate the Marine's discipline and strength. Her years of rigorous training in the Marine Corps had taught her not only how to defend herself, but also how to maintain mental clarity in the face of aggression. She understood the importance of timing, precision, and control. Her mind calculated the safest and most effective way to respond to the immediate threat while minimizing risk to herself and others. Every muscle was ready, coiled like a spring, waiting for the exact moment to act decisively. In that tense pause, the courtroom audience watched in a mixture of disbelief and suspense. Some were frozen by fear, unsure how to intervene. Others, more aware of the situation, recognized the incredible discipline of the Marine and waited to see how she would respond. Time seemed to stretch as the unspoken drama unfolded. The officer, now fully aggressive, leaned forward slightly, perhaps underestimating her capabilities or overestimating his own authority. It was a critical miscalculation, a moment that would determine the outcome of the confrontation. Then, in a split second, the Marine acted. Channeling all of her strength, precision, and military training, she delivered a single, controlled punch to the officer. The motion was perfectly executed, targeting a point that would disable his immediate aggression without causing unnecessary harm. The force of her action, combined with her skill and composure, was enough to knock him off balance and send him sprawling backward. The sound of the impact reverberated through the courtroom, followed by a stunned silence. People could hardly believe what had just occurred. Spectators gasped, some instinctively standing while others clutched their chairs, still trying to process the sudden eruption of violence. Lawyers paused mid-sentence, witnesses froze mid-word, and the judge slammed the gavel, demanding immediate order. The Marine, despite the adrenaline still coursing through her body, stood tall, composed, and fully in control. Her expression remained calm, her posture unwavering. She had acted decisively, not out of anger but out of necessity, responding to an unprovoked attack with measured force. The officer, now recovering from the shock and pain of the punch, struggled to regain his composure. For a moment he seemed stunned, unable to comprehend the Marine's skill and speed. His colleagues rushed forward, trying to intervene and prevent further escalation. The courtroom was filled with the sounds of movement, urgent whispers, and the judge's voice commanding attention and calm. Everyone present recognized that the Marine had not only defended herself, but had done so with remarkable precision and restraint. Her actions were the embodiment of discipline and professionalism, even in the face of blatant aggression. Following the incident, the courtroom slowly began to regain order. People whispered among themselves, recounting the sequence of events in disbelief. The judge demanded statements from both the officer and the Marine, while officers and courtroom staff worked quickly to restore a sense of safety and authority. Though shaken, the Marine remained composed. She answered questions clearly and calmly, her voice steady, her demeanor unwavering. Her actions, though dramatic, were guided by principle, self-control, and a clear understanding of the necessity of her response. News of the incident would eventually spread far beyond the courtroom walls. Observers immediately recognized the extraordinary circumstances, the unprovoked aggression, the Marines' disciplined and precise reaction, and the larger questions it raised about authority, professionalism, and respect. The story was compelling not only because of the dramatic confrontation, but because it highlighted the Marines' training, courage, and calm presence under extreme pressure. People were fascinated by her ability to maintain control in the most unpredictable and intense moments. Even after the courtroom cleared, the energy of the confrontation lingered. Lawyers discussed the implications quietly among themselves. Staff recounted the sequence of events in hushed tones, and the officer, now recovering from the immediate shock, faced scrutiny from his peers and supervisors. The Marine left the courtroom with her head held high, her composure intact, and a sense of quiet satisfaction that she had responded appropriately to an unacceptable situation. She had defended herself, upheld her dignity, and acted in a way that reflected the training and principles she had spent years developing. This moment, though brief in duration, was monumental in impact. It demonstrated the importance of discipline, the ability to remain calm under pressure, and the necessity of standing up for oneself when confronted with aggression. The courtroom, which had seemed ordinary at the beginning of the day, had become the stage for a demonstration of courage, skill, and precision that few would forget. The Marine's actions were a testament not only to her strength, but also to the values instilled in her through years of rigorous military service, values that guided her every decision, even in the most unexpected and challenging circumstances. By the time the courtroom proceedings resumed, the tension had shifted. There was respect in the air for the Marine, tempered with caution as everyone recognized that she was not someone to be underestimated. The officer, chastened and humiliated, was careful with his actions and words, understanding that the Marine's response had clearly communicated her capability and resolve. Spectators, lawyers, and staff carried a heightened awareness of the dynamics in the room, recognizing the extraordinary circumstances that had unfolded and the composure of the individual at the center of it all. And so, what had begun as a routine morning in the courthouse had transformed into a dramatic confrontation that showcased discipline, self-control, and the power of a single, decisive action in response to aggression. The Marine, through her skill, training, and focus, had ensured not only her own safety, but also the integrity of the situation, leaving a lasting impression on everyone who witnessed the events. The courtroom was still buzzing with tension, even after the officer had been knocked off balance. The shock of what had just occurred was palpable, filling the room with an energy that seemed almost electric. Some spectators were frozen in their seats, wide-eyed, unable to process the sudden and dramatic confrontation they had just witnessed. Others whispered urgently to one another, recounting the event in low voices, their words filled with disbelief and astonishment. The Marine, despite the adrenaline still coursing through her body, remained remarkably calm. Her breathing was steady, her posture unshaken, and her eyes sharp and focused. Though a few seconds had passed, she knew this was far from over. Even as the courtroom staff scrambled to regain order, the officer struggled to rise. His pride, bruised as much as his body, made it difficult for him to accept what had happened. He blinked rapidly, trying to clear his vision and shake off the disorientation, but the force of the Marine's punch had left him momentarily stunned. Those few seconds of incapacitation had created a momentary shift in the power dynamics within the room, and it was clear to everyone that the Marine now held control, not through words or authority, but through the undeniable proof of her strength, skill, and discipline. Her actions were precise, measured, and undeniably effective. Witnesses to the event began to murmur among themselves, their reactions a mixture of awe and fear. Some noted her composure, her ability to remain calm in such a high-stress moment, while others focused on the sheer force of the punch itself. The courtroom, which had previously been a controlled environment of rules and procedure, now felt alive with tension. Every eye followed the Marine as she stood her ground, ready for whatever might come next. She did not move hastily or allow her focus to waver. Instead, she remained centered, aware that any unnecessary action could escalate the situation further. The judge, recovering from the initial shock, quickly called for silence, banging the gavel with authority. His voice, firm but tinged with surprise, demanded immediate attention. "Order in the courtroom," he declared, looking directly at the officer and the Marine in turn. The judge's presence helped to restore a measure of calm, though the energy in the room remained charged. Lawyers quickly returned to their notes, attempting to continue with the proceedings despite the dramatic interruption. Staff members moved quickly to separate the officer from the Marine, guiding him toward a seat further away, while ensuring she remained undisturbed. For the Marine, the moments following her reaction were crucial. She had acted instinctively, relying on years of military training and discipline, but now she had to navigate the aftermath carefully. Her mind worked rapidly, assessing the situation, considering her options, and preparing to respond if necessary. She knew that maintaining composure was just as important as the punch itself. A single misstep in the following minutes could turn a controlled response into a chaotic confrontation. Her focus remained unbroken as she observed the officer, the spectators, and the judge, all while processing the intensity of what had just occurred. The officer, meanwhile, was struggling with a mix of shock, embarrassment, and anger. He had intended to assert authority, perhaps even to intimidate, but instead, he had been physically overpowered in a manner that left him humiliated. His colleagues, who had been nearby, offered assistance, but also glanced nervously at the Marine, realizing that underestimating her had been a grave mistake. The room, once a neutral space for legal proceedings, had transformed into a stage where strength, discipline, and presence of mind determined the outcome of the moment. The officer's aggression had backfired spectacularly, and now he faced the consequences of his actions, both physically and socially. Spectators in the courtroom were captivated. Many had never witnessed anything like this in such a formal setting. The unexpected clash between a trained Marine and an aggressive officer created a story that seemed almost cinematic in nature. People's attention was riveted on the Marine, whose calm and poised demeanor contrasted sharply with the chaos surrounding her. She had demonstrated not only physical skill, but also mental clarity, a combination that commanded respect from everyone present. Observers could sense that she was a person who could handle pressure and danger with intelligence and control, traits that were both impressive and inspiring. As order slowly began to return, the Marine took deliberate, measured steps to ensure that she remained in control of the situation. She adjusted her posture slightly, breathing steadily, and maintained eye contact with the officer from a safe distance. Her actions conveyed a sense of authority without aggression, a subtle reminder that while she had defended herself decisively, she was not there to escalate the situation further. Every movement was intentional, reflecting the discipline and precision instilled in her through years of military service. Her focus was unwavering, her presence commanding, and her awareness acute. The judge, having regained a measure of control, addressed the Marine directly. "Are you all right?" he asked, his tone serious but not accusatory. Her calm, steady reply reassured him and the courtroom staff that she had not been seriously harmed. "I'm fine, Your Honor," she said, her voice clear, confident, and composed. Her response reflected both honesty and professionalism, emphasizing that she had reacted only when necessary and had maintained control throughout. The courtroom staff nodded in recognition of her composure, while the spectators continued to observe with fascination and admiration. The officer, now seated and recovering, realized that his behavior would have serious consequences. His unprovoked aggression in a public, formal setting had not only been witnessed by dozens of people, but had also been countered with remarkable skill. Colleagues and bystanders alike recognized the severity of his actions and the appropriateness of the Marine's response. Whispers filled the room as people speculated on what might happen next, discussing potential disciplinary action and the implications for everyone involved. The incident had transformed from a private courtroom matter into a situation with broader social and professional consequences. Throughout all of this, the Marine remained composed, fully aware of the attention she had garnered. She understood that every movement, every word, and every expression mattered. Her reputation, both in the military and in the public eye, depended on her ability to remain disciplined while defending herself effectively. She did not allow pride or anger to cloud her judgment. Instead, she relied on training, experience, and instinct to navigate the immediate aftermath. Her calm authority became the center of the room, a stabilizing force amid the chaos created by the officer's aggression. Lawyers resumed their work, carefully adjusting their proceedings to account for the incident. Witnesses, initially shaken, were encouraged to continue, while staff ensured that security measures were observed. The judge's attention remained focused, balancing the need to maintain order with the recognition that the Marine's response had been both appropriate and controlled. In those moments, the courtroom was a microcosm of discipline, authority, and professionalism, all tested under unexpected circumstances. Spectators continued to observe, some leaning forward with curiosity, others whispering in astonishment. The Marine's actions had left a lasting impression, demonstrating that discipline, preparation, and courage could decisively alter the outcome of even the most tense situations. People could see that she had acted not out of anger, but out of necessity, a principle that resonated strongly in the room. Her ability to combine physical skill with mental clarity was remarkable, and it was clear to everyone that she had handled the confrontation with exceptional poise and intelligence. As the courtroom began to settle into a more normal rhythm, the Marine remained vigilant. She understood that while the immediate threat had passed, the situation was not entirely resolved. Observers continued to watch her closely, some in admiration, others with curiosity, and a few with skepticism. She remained focused, aware that her continued composure would be key to managing the remaining proceedings effectively. Her disciplined presence conveyed a quiet confidence, a reminder that strength and control often speak louder than words or threats. The officer, now facing the reality of the situation, attempted to regain a sense of authority. However, his previous actions had undermined his position. He was forced to navigate the remainder of the proceedings with care, conscious of the fact that any further aggression could result in serious consequences. The courtroom staff, lawyers, and spectators all recognized the shift in dynamics. The Marine's controlled response had not only defended her, but had also established her presence and authority within the room. Throughout the remainder of the morning, the courtroom atmosphere remained charged but under control. The Marine continued to participate in the proceedings with professionalism and focus, never allowing the earlier confrontation to distract her from the task at hand. Witnesses were called, legal arguments were presented, and the judge maintained order with a firm but balanced hand. The incident, while dramatic, became part of the larger story of the day, demonstrating the impact of training, discipline, and courage in unexpected circumstances. By the time the morning session concluded, it was clear that the Marine had earned the respect of everyone present. Spectators, staff, and even some colleagues of the officer acknowledged her composure, skill, and courage. The incident would be remembered not just for the punch itself, but for the way she had handled the entire situation with professionalism and intelligence. Her actions were a testament to the importance of preparation, mental clarity, and the ability to respond effectively under pressure. In the hours and days that followed, the story spread quietly at first, and then more widely, as word of the courtroom confrontation reached people outside the building. Those who had witnessed it spoke of the Marines' courage, the officers' unprovoked aggression, and the remarkable manner in which the situation had been resolved. It became an example not only of physical skill, but also of mental discipline, a reminder that true strength often lies in the combination of calm, focus, and the ability to act decisively when necessary. By the end of Part 3, the Marine had firmly established herself as a figure of authority and respect. Her calm and precise handling of the officer's aggression ensured her safety, maintained the integrity of the courtroom, and left a lasting impression on everyone present. The events had tested her discipline, composure, and judgment, and she had passed with flying colors, demonstrating that courage and skill, when guided by professionalism and intelligence, can turn even the most challenging moments into powerful examples of human capability. When the courtroom finally adjourned for the day, the energy inside the building felt very different from how it had felt that morning. People moved more slowly, their voices lower, their expressions thoughtful. What had happened earlier was no longer just a moment of shock. It had become something heavier, something that stayed with everyone as they gathered their belongings and stepped into the hallway. Conversations sparked quietly in corners, between lawyers, clerks, and observers who had witnessed the incident. Each person seemed to replay the moment in their mind, trying to understand how a routine day had turned into something unforgettable. The Marine exited the courtroom calmly, just as she had entered it. Her posture was steady, her face composed, but inside she was processing everything that had happened. The rush of adrenaline had faded, replaced by a deep sense of awareness. She knew the incident was not over simply because the hearing had ended. There would be questions, reviews, and discussions. She understood how systems worked, how actions were examined from every angle. Still, she felt grounded in the fact that she had acted to protect herself, and had done so with control and discipline. That knowledge gave her quiet confidence as she walked through the courthouse doors. Outside, the sunlight felt almost unreal after the tense hours indoors. People gathered on the steps, some waiting for rides, others lingering in conversation. A few glanced at the Marine with curiosity and respect. No one approached her directly, but she could sense the attention. She was used to being observed. Military life had taught her how to carry herself under scrutiny. She took a slow breath and continued forward, knowing that how she handled the hours and days ahead mattered just as much as what she had done in the courtroom. Inside the courthouse, officials were already beginning to address the situation. Statements were requested, timelines reviewed, and witnesses identified. The judge, deeply concerned by what had occurred, ordered an immediate review of the officer's conduct. Court staff provided their accounts, describing the growing tension, the unprovoked action, and the Marine's response. Their words were careful but honest. What stood out to many was the consistency of the descriptions. The Marine had remained calm, had not provoked the situation, and had acted only after a clear boundary had been crossed. The officer, meanwhile, was facing a very different reality. The confidence he had carried earlier in the day was gone, replaced by discomfort and uncertainty. He was aware that his actions had been witnessed by many and documented through official channels. His attempt to assert authority had resulted in consequences he could not ignore. Conversations with supervisors were serious and direct. He was informed that his behavior would be formally reviewed and that he would be temporarily removed from duty while the process moved forward. The weight of those words settled heavily on him as he realized the seriousness of what he had done. News of the incident began to spread beyond the courthouse. At first, it moved through word of mouth, friends telling friends, witnesses recounting the moment to family members. Soon, it reached broader circles, discussed in workplaces, community spaces, and online conversations. People were drawn not just to the dramatic nature of the event, but to the deeper questions it raised about respect, professionalism, and accountability. Many were struck by the Marine's composure and discipline, noting how she had handled herself before, during, and after the confrontation. The Marine's commanding officers were informed as well. They reviewed the details carefully, examining statements and reports. Her service record showed years of discipline, training, and responsible conduct. When they spoke with her, they did so with respect and seriousness. She explained the incident clearly, without exaggeration or emotion, focusing only on the facts. Her ability to remain calm while recounting the experience reinforced what they already knew about her character. She was reminded that she had represented herself and her training with integrity, even under extreme pressure. As days passed, the incident became a point of reflection for many people. Discussions emerged about how authority should be exercised, how respect must be maintained in all settings, and how training and self-control can make the difference in critical moments. Some focused on the Marine's strength, others on her restraint. What united most opinions was the recognition that the situation had been mishandled by the person entrusted with maintaining order, and that the Marine's response had prevented the situation from becoming far worse. The Marine herself returned to her routine, but the experience stayed with her. During quiet moments, she reflected on the events, not with anger but with clarity. She thought about how quickly situations could change, how important it was to stay alert and prepared, and how discipline had guided her actions when emotions could have taken over. She did not seek attention or praise. For her, the incident was another reminder of why training mattered, not just for physical readiness but for mental strength and judgment. People who knew her noticed a subtle change. Not in her demeanor, she remained calm and focused, but in the way others interacted with her. There was a deeper level of respect, an unspoken acknowledgement of her capability. Some approached her privately, expressing admiration for how she had handled the situation. She listened politely, thanked them briefly, and moved on. She did not see herself as a hero. She saw herself as someone who had done what was necessary, guided by years of preparation and values. The official review concluded weeks later. Findings confirmed that the officer's actions were inappropriate and violated professional standards. Consequences followed, reinforcing the message that authority came with responsibility, and that misuse of it would not be ignored. The outcome was discussed quietly but firmly within professional circles, serving as a reminder of the importance of conduct, especially in positions of trust. For the Marine, the resolution brought a sense of closure. She did not dwell on the incident, but she did not forget it either. It became part of her story, not as a moment of conflict, but as a moment of clarity. She had learned that even in places meant for order and fairness, unpredictability existed. What mattered most was how one responded when tested. Over time, the story settled into something more meaningful than a dramatic headline. It became an example shared in discussions about discipline, self-control, and standing firm without losing one's balance. People spoke about the power of preparation, the importance of calm under pressure, and the strength found in measured action rather than reaction. The Marine continued her service with the same dedication she had always shown. Her focus remained on her responsibilities, her training, and the values she upheld. She understood that moments like the one in the courtroom were rare, but the principles behind them were constant. Respect, readiness, and restraint were not situational, they were ways of life. In the end, What stayed with those who had witnessed the event was not just the confrontation, but the aftermath. They remembered the calm that followed the chaos, the accountability that followed the mistake, and the quiet strength of someone who refused to be shaken. The courtroom returned to its routines, the building once again filled with ordinary days. But for many, it would always be the place where they learned a powerful lesson about dignity, discipline, and the true meaning of strength. And for the Marine, it was a reminder that real power does not come from dominance or aggression, but from control, clarity, and the courage to stand firm when it matters most.